Hi, everyone. Welcome to our NAMI Lunch and Learn. We've got a special presenter this month, Tonya Kron. She's visiting all the way from Colorado, and she works at North Range Behavioral Health. And the reason I snagged her was that I used to work with her, and so I know a little bit about the kind of work she does. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She is a licensed professional counselor, or LPC, and a licensed addiction counselor, or LAC, in the state of Colorado. She graduated with her Master's of Arts in Counseling from Colorado Christian University in 2006 and became an LPC in December 2018 and an LAC in June 2019. She joined the Multi-Systemic Therapy, or MST, team in North Range Behavioral Health in 2016, and she might tell you a little bit about that program as well. She served as clinical lead or team supervisor for one of the MST teams since 2021. She's the current president of Colorado Counseling Association after previously serving as the Northern Region liaison. She has presented at Colorado Behavioral Healthcare Council's annual conference and in the fall conference for working with transitional aged youth. And during her time with North Range, she's given many community and Facebook Live presentations to help parents and caregivers navigate supporting their youth, and as well as covering parenting strategies. Throughout her counseling practicum and internship in a family practice residency program, Tonya's provided many presentations, including those on eating disorders, preventing burnout, and pain management strategies to combat opioid use and abuse within the patient population at the practice. She's been a board member for the Larimer County Juvenile Community Review Board, and prior to transitioning into the counseling field, she taught at the college level and worked in print journalism with 2 BAs, and 1 in speech communication and 1 in journalism. Welcome, Tonya.
Yeah. Listening to that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've done a lot. Wow. It
Yes,
doesn't seem like it sometimes. So one point of correction, I realized that I had an incorrect year. My graduation year for my master's in counseling was actually 2016, not 2006. So yeah, I caught that when I was doing something else, and I'm like, I really don't know how far that biography went before I realized I made a
you were probably in elementary school then.
I wish. I was doing my undergrad at that time. So I may look young, but no, joking. Like Joanna said, I am a LPC and a LAC. I'm really active with Colorado Counseling Association. But really, I guess the biggest thing is to explain really what MST is. That's where I get a lot of my experience, and that's what I'll be pulling from a little bit today. So MST is multi-systemic therapy. It is an intensive in-home family model. We work with adolescents, so ages 12 to 17, and their families, and those adolescents are usually at risk of being removed from the home. They're usually system involved in some form or fashion. Obviously, school is going to be one of those fashions. Sometimes it's because there are behavioral concerns, whether there is being able to graduate, truancy, you name it, we kind of work with it. We also have a lot of children that are involved in the legal system, whether through probation, diversion, or just getting off it, and honestly trying to prevent some of it. But a lot of our work is really caregiver focused. We're very behaviorally specific. We're not a traditional family model because we are so caregiver focused and behaviorally specific. So I guess that's really the down and dirty about that. So I could talk MST all day. I've been doing that for a little over 6 years now. So if you have questions on that later, we can certainly talk about, what that offers. But today you're here to hear me talk a little bit about The Whole Brain Child, the book by Siegel and Bryson. And yeah, we'll just kind of dive into it. So let me share my screen. Okay. All right. And everything looks good on that end, Joanna?
Yep, looks great.
Perfect. All right. So yeah, it's pieces of a whole, and there's going to be some themes as we go through. Obviously, we want to work towards the whole. And just because we're talking about a child, these are strategies that can even be used with adults, even using within ourselves. So a little bit who I am, we just kind of talked about that. I also want to add I am an empty nester, so I've done some of this stuff with my niece. It was a little bit older when I finally started learning about these things, but it's still pretty effective. So like I said, children doesn't necessarily mean like little kids. It could be anyone. She's currently planning on graduating college this semester, so it makes me feel old, but I've been there. So yeah, so we'll definitely try and talk more about that, and depending on time, I may be able to be intentional around incorporating some of those examples. Okay, so let's get started here.
Why are you crying? Because I want to go to Chick-fil-A, but Chick-fil-A is closed. Oh, isn't that terrible? What's wrong? No. You okay? No. You're not okay? No. You want a snack? Yes. Food? Yes. You okay? Yeah, I'm okay. You're fine? Yes. Why are you crying? Because I want bacon. But there is no more bacon. Yeah. Not today. You ate all the bacon. You had about 5 pieces. No, I just want more. There's no more. I don't know what to pick.
What?
Take away.
What's the matter?
Take away.
You're very grumpy.
No, I'm not grumpy.
Go on. You want to watch Donovan Mitchell?
Yeah.
But it's time for bed. You really want to watch him?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. The game's already over. We can watch him this weekend when he plays again, okay?
Okay. So how many of you have experienced some form or fashion like this?
Oh,
I'm sure
yes.
most of us have, right? This is ideally what we're gonna talk about. You heard, I'm assuming dad talking about, wanting Donovan Mitchell not playing. Well, he's doing exactly what one of the strategies that I'm going to tell you about a little bit later tells you not to do. But we'll get there. But before we get there, we want to really understand a few key concepts, because Siegel and Bryson build upon this throughout the entire book. If you haven't read it, it's a really easy read. There's some great information in the back. There's like a refrigerator post that you can put on there. But integration is the key. They really talk about how do we build integration, because that's really what is going to make a healthy whole brain child. So according to Siegel and Bryson, so integration, what it does, it coordinates and balances the separate regions of the brain that it links together. So tantrums, meltdowns, aggression, and other challenging experiences of parenting are a result of a loss of integration, or what they also call disintegration. So keep in mind here too, and when I say it goes about the spectrum, we don't have to start with toddler. We can start now with ourselves, with, older kiddos, because the brain's moldable. Neuroscience has shown this, we influence our brain every day by our interactions and our experiences. And it's the same thing with the kiddo. Just because they may be really heavy on the tantrums now, it doesn't mean it has to be like this always. So our brain's constantly being wired and rewired. And yes, there's basic brain architecture that you have to keep in mind. And there's definitely some inborn characteristics and temperament. But any adult, Bryson and Siegel specifically mentioned parents. The book's geared towards parents. I'm also going to incorporate professionals on here because as professionals, there's certainly things that we can do to help reinforce some of these theories and strategies and all that good stuff. So we really want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help build and develop a resilient and well-integrated brain. Something to keep in mind, again, neuroscience tells us our brain's not fully developed until about our mid-20s. So there are going to be times that we're not going to be able to access a fully integrated brain because it's just not there yet. But there are steps that can be taken now, starting at a very young age, to help it build that way. So an integrated brain. So why are we talking about that? Is because what an integrated brain does is it can help with improved decision-making, better control of body and emotions, a fuller self-understanding, stronger relationships, success in school. So all of these things that we really hope for our kids. So we're going to talk about some of those strategies that we can start building more of that integration. So we are going to want to talk a little bit more about avoiding the either or. So Bryson and Siegel refer to it as chaos and rigidity. Sometimes it's easier just to remember there are shades of gray. Again, we'll talk about that either or a little bit. The right brain, left brain, and then upstairs, downstairs brain. All of these things kind of work together to be able to build integration. So if you're avoiding the either or, life's not black and white, stuff happens. Things aren't always right or wrong. It's not black or white. It's not always chaos. It's not always rigidity. There's value in both. And the key is going to be, they use the visual of thinking of like a riverbank. You're going down the water. You want to stay in the middle and stay off the banks, because the more you're on the banks, the more problems there are. So it's, again, that natural balance of what does that look like. So the longer that kiddos are able to regulate and stay in the middle, they're going to be more integrated, they're going to be more emotionally healthy, and of course, like I said, more regulated. So you have the left brain, right brain. So Siegel and Bryson, they break it down into the left brain tends to be more logical, it loves order, and then on the other hand, you have the right brain, that's more around meaning and feel of an experience. Think like big picture type things. So if you think of left brain or the L's, logical, linguistic, and literal. And then on the right brain, you have the emotional components, nonverbals, experiential, and autobiographical. So that's where we're kind of building ourselves. Again, thinking about neuroscience and brain development, younger kids tend to be more right brain dominant. That more emotional, nonverbal, that's why we're having all these feelings, and it's really hard for kids to be able to identify and put words to what they are feeling. That's usually lasts about the first 3 years, and once you start getting that why, right? A toddler's favorite question is why? Why can't I do this? Why can't I have that? Why did you say that? Why? That's a sign that that logical part of our brain, the left side of the brain, is starting to kick in. That's where we can start using some of these strategies and building some of that in. So again, the goal, integration. Between the right and left brain, we want the horizontal integration because we're thinking the sides. And so the corpus callosum fires back and forth. So that's what connects the two sides of the brain. And so how do we use both logic and creativity and emotion? Again, we don't want it to be either or, we want to be able to use both. So upstairs and downstairs brain. So again, Siegel and Bryson break it down into these two parts. So downstairs is going to include like the brainstem and the limbic system. These are where basic functions are housed, those automatic things we don't think about. Breathing, blinking. Some of those innate reactions and impulses, again, think fight or flight, that's where this is housed. And then really strong emotions, anger and fear. And a lot of this really comes from, again, protection. That's really where we are, we're the animal part of the brain. You'll hear a little bit about that too. So upstairs is the cerebral cortex and the middle prefrontal cortex, where most of the higher level thinking and processing comes in. So it allows for people to be able to regulate their emotions, think about consequences, think before acting, and even consider others. So all those really things, big things that we think make up a healthy child, right? Well, when they work together, yes, 100%. But like I said, the brain's not fully developed. That front part of the brain, the upstairs brain, is one of the last pieces to develop. So we get caught a lot as kids in that downstairs brain because of what we call the amygdalas, that part in there. And it's kind of what they call, as they meaning Siegel and Bryson, as kind of the watchdog of the brain. It's on alert, trying to make sure we're safe, trying to make sure we're okay. And that's how kids flip their lids. And what that means, it's preventing them from accessing the upstairs part of the brain. They're stuck in that downstairs part. So as adults, that's where we kind of step in to help them lower their lid to be able to access that upstairs. So I'm going to let Siegel actually explain his brain fist.
One of the most rewarding experiences for me has been to study brain science and apply it to the experience of parenting. And the hand model of the brain that I use to teach parents is very useful to understand that. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your palm, put your fingers over the top, this is a very useful model of the brain. And when we can actually see in front of us what's going on in the brain, then we can change what the brain does. So let me walk you through very basically what happens in this brain and the structures in it. And it goes like this. The spinal cord comes up representing the wrist, and then you have coming up into the skull the brain stem and the limbic area, which work together to help regulate arousal and your emotions and the way you have a fight, flight, freeze response. These are below the cortex, the limbic and brainstem areas, and the cortex is this higher part of the brain that allows us to perceive the outside world, to think and reason. And this frontmost part of the brain, right behind your forehead, so the person's oriented like this, is actually the part that regulates the subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas. This regulation is very important because sometimes we can have all sorts of things happen in our life. We're tired, we're exhausted, someone pushes a particular emotional button, and we can flip our lids. So rather than being tuned in and connected and balanced and flexible, we can lose all of that flexibility, even lose moral reasoning, and act in ways that are terrifying to others, including our children. Now, you can actually bring yourself back online and come back to the high road and make a repair with your child, and that's important to explain to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. They need a timeout. And by even just naming that, they can tame it. And that's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and our children to help us all make sense of what goes on in the emotional communication that we have in the course of day-to-day life. One of the most rewarding experiences.
There we go. Let's try that. Okay. So we're going to kind of build upon that because flipping the lid is a thing we want to try and avoid. It's something that can be helpful to utilize with kiddos because as you heard him say, like, hey, we've had a kid say this. But I want you to kind of keep those things in mind. So let's move on to the strategies. I'm moving a little quickly. I tend to dive in and talk too much and give too many examples, so I don't cover everything, and I want to make sure I cover everything. So strategy number 1 that is identified in the book is to connect and redirect. So you want to surf those emotional waves. So what you want to do, you want to be able to connect with the right side of the brain. And again, remember the right side of the brain is kind of that emotional component of the brain. This means we're going to give the kids space to feel those emotions, right? Because sometimes when that wave is hitting, nothing else happens. Brains still aren't fully developed, so they're not going to be able to access it. So we want to give them that chance to express it. So you want to, as the parent, as the adult, the caregiver, as the professional, use your own right brain, provide empathy and connection. And then once they're regulated a little bit more, that wave's kind of passed and smoothed out, then we can redirect with the left and use some logic. So a great example or a great way to use this, if it's all or nothing, as adults, we recognize very few things are ever all or nothing. Again, that black or white. So let them feel that way, provide some space for them to feel it. Nonverbals, express love and care. And then once they're able to be like, okay, remember when this happened, you're saying, your older sister is getting all the love and attention. And now that they're a little more calm, you can say, hey, remember when we went out and had just a day, you and I took you to get your favorite ice cream and we had a good day, right? Yep. Do you feel like I love you still? Yep. Is it okay if I love sister too? Yep. Fabulous. And we can keep moving. Obviously, it's a little overly simplistic, but it's the basic connection of give the space for the emotion, let the biggest of the wave pass, and then come back with that left side of the brain and that logic. So Siegel kind of introduced the name it to tame it. This is strategy number 2. And this is telling stories to calm big emotions. Again, we want to give space for the kiddos to tell their stories, tell how they feel, tell what they experienced, but giving them that space, right? We want them to be able to engage the left side of their brain. So we've got to kind of wait for that wave to pass, let them get it all out, put some words to it, and then we're able to start naming what happened. Okay, so, the teacher just started yelling at you and threw something at you for no reason. Really, what happened before that? So really, let's dive in. Let's bring some of that logic, some of the actual, what is the full experience, not just the small piece. Make sure if you're going to do this, that both you and kiddo are actually in a good frame of mind, and that you're able to have that space and conversation. Not, hey, I got to run out the door in 5 minutes and get to work. Probably not the best time to do it. So this may be a time where it's, let's connect and redirect. Let's let the wave pass. I love you. And you know what? When I get back home after work, let's kind of talk through this. I want to understand what's going on. Trying to avoid the situation, trying to avoid what we're hoping to name is counterintuitive. This is not good. It's only going to draw more attention to it and make it bigger. So you want to make sure that you're giving the child the opportunity to name it and make it more manageable for them. So it's applying some of that logic and understanding to have an understanding of the actual event. Okay, so whole brain strategy number 3, engage, don't enrage. So appealing to the upstairs brain. So the previous 2 that we were talking about were right and left. Now we're going to bring in some of that up and down. So it builds upon some of these strategies already, connect and redirect. So you want to provide that space. And I'm looking at the wrong note. I apologize. Still, we're building on all of this great information, right? So building upon it means we're exercising it, just like a muscle in our arm or our leg. To make it bigger, make it stronger, to make it work well, you got to exercise it. And so that's where it's coming. Hang on just a second here. I'm getting myself off. That's what happens when I have too many papers in front of me. So again, we're going to name it. So we're naming right now what I'm feeling, right? I'm feeling caught off guard, anxious, because I'm like, oh boy, right? And now I'm going to redirect myself of, okay, I got to get back on task. I'm going to engage with it. I'm going to provide space for my emotions afterwards. And I'm going to continue on with my presentation. Again, these are skills we can use as we move forward. So number 3 is engage, don't enrage. We're providing the space. And then we're going to offer a choice. This is one of the key things I work with the parents that I work with on my the kiddos on my caseload. It's going to be a controlled choice. It's not going to be, oh, the kid can pull out of left field what they want their choices to be. It's going to be, do you want to wear your red shoes or your blue shoes? Both are appropriate for the weather, both fit, both are comfortable, and they're acceptable for school. As you get older, working with kiddos on allowances, do you want to spend that money to go to the movies with your friends? Or do you want to save up for that video game you've been wanting? Again, making those choices that either one's okay, you're still allowing the choice, but it gives them a chance to hone their decision-making skills and think through some potential contingencies or consequences of what those choices could be. This is, keeping in mind too, that we want to make sure it's still within the appropriate boundaries for the kiddo and what's realistic. Oh, do you want to go drive the car? Or do you want to go, do you want to go buy a Maserati, or do you want to buy this old beater? Well, the Maserati is probably not realistic for most of us, but you know what? This is still a car. So what's going to be something more realistic for you and the family and for the kiddo? Okay, so now I am going to move on to strategy number 4. Blame it on the blonde. I apologize. So number 4 is use it or lose it, exercising the upstairs brain. So this is that practice part that I'm talking about, because the brain, again, it's being wired and rewired. And this is how we do that. We practice using some of these skills. We want to have the kiddo practice using these skills and developing that integration piece on their own. So 5 of the key components that Siegel and Bryson identify are bringing in sound decision making. So you want to, again, build that executive functioning and give the kid an opportunity for decision making skills, problem solving, all of that good stuff. Controlling emotions in the body. So again, decision making when upset, but what are some other options? Like right now, I'm focusing on my breathing and doing some of my anti-anxiety skills, right? My feet are planted. I'm really trying to, remember where I am. These are exactly what we want to teach our kids. There are ways to kind of manage what we're feeling. And how do we, again, bring in what Siegel was talking about with the flipping of the lid? How can we bring that in and recognize, like, hey, I'm not in an okay spot. I'm about to lose it. Are we able to take a break before we flip it? And if we do, okay, so how do we bring it back? Self-understanding. This is the opportunity to bring in questions. Really giving the kiddo an opportunity to think further about something, whether it's about like a behavior choice that occurred or a feeling. And this is even an opportunity as the kiddo gets older, especially kiddos that are more engaged and interested in writing, but using a journal to kind of get it out and take it a step further, other than I had a bad day. Okay, well, what does that mean? What was bad? Was there something good about it, or was it just like Alexander and the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, right? Empathy. So again, while we're asking those questions for self-understanding, we want to start asking questions to get them start thinking of the other person. And a good activity is when you're watching a TV show and somebody's crying, and you can ask the kiddo, hey, why do you think that person's crying? Try and get that connected. If you hear, especially for the younger ones, I would do this with my niece, oh, that baby's crying. Hey, why do you think the baby's crying? And like, oh, well, maybe they're hungry. Maybe they don't like all the noise that's going on around them. Hey, that's great. I'm glad you're thinking about that. And then the last part of this strategy is kind of the morality piece. So combining all of it and helping the kiddo build a sense of what's right or wrong, and even taking it a step further of the greater good, not just thinking about the individual perspective. This piece is also highly important for you to model some of this information for the kiddo. So if you're wanting this kid to be honest, are you being honest yourself? Are we wanting this kid to be generous? Okay, well, one, what does generous look like? And are we modeling that? Are we being respectful? What does that look like? Are we modeling it? To show you how important modeling is, one of my favorite stories, when my niece was in, I think it was 4th grade, I used to help volunteer with the class. And so the kids got super familiar with me. I interacted with them. I'm from the South. I say sir and ma'am all the time. It just habit. I don't think twice about it. It was drilled into me. So I said it to the kids. And one of the little boys was like, well, why did you call me sir? I'm not a sir. I'm a kid. I'm like, well, you're a sir. You deserve respect. You're a person. So I call you sir to show respect. And I hope that by me showing you respect, you're going to show me respect. And keep in mind, this is when this kid's in 4th grade. And after that interaction, I noticed around the school, he started doing that. He even got a little award at the end of the year by the principal, because the principal recognized the respectfulness because that little interaction. Several years later, I had a friend whose son, same grade as my niece, was friends with this boy that my niece was in school with. And she was telling me about the story of how he's so respectful, and it's sir and ma'am. And he said it was, somebody in his classroom that taught him that. And I'm like, yeah, I did. And I shared the interaction. So it's those little things that we may not recognize we're modeling, but if we can take those little steps, it makes a huge difference, especially when they're at impressionable age. Okay. Other strategies. So 5, move it or lose it, moving the body to avoid losing the mind. This is meaning getting your body to move, right? How many of you are just sitting here staring at a computer screen? I've been there. I do it too often. My shoulders are to my ears, or I'm clenching my jaw. Too many of us. So I'm going to challenge you right now. Sit back in your chair, roll your shoulders back, unclench your jaw, take a deep breath. Think of how much just that little movement impacted you. I noticed throughout my day, I do this. I work with a trainer and he's like, you need to start doing this. It happens, right? It's so natural, but it's those little things. So if a kiddo's highly dysregulated, get them moving. Let's go take a walk. One of the middle schools here, if there's a kiddo that's about to lose their stuff, about to flip their lid, the school social worker, one of the counselors, or one of the admin people will take that kiddo and walk around the block. And it's amazing how much more information and conversation is able to go on and actually talk about the situation. So before we dive into the next strategies, it's to talk about memory. I'm probably going to speed up a little bit more here because I'm going to try and get through this. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So there's a couple of myths that Siegel and Bryson identify that they want you to disregard. So the first myth is that memories don't really come out of the brain like a file cabinet. You can't just go something off the shelf, pull it out, oh, there's my memory. Memories are about associations. Again, neuroscience, how the brain is wired. So as you're having these experiences, it's wiring together. So that's what's triggering that memory. And the other myth is that the brain is like a photocopier and the memory is an exact reproduction of the event. False. We wish, right? And that's why a lot of times in the legal world and police are like, victims' memories aren't always reliable. This is why. Because memories are associations and it's influenced by your state of mind. It's influenced by your emotions. So if I go out to eat with my ex-boyfriend and my ex-boyfriend becomes my ex-boyfriend when I'm eating, I'm probably not going to have positive memories of that restaurant, regardless of how the good food is. I'm going to be like, oh, nope, I'm good. And I'm going to keep on going. And the same thing here. That's what they're talking about. Siegel and Bryson also talk about implicit and explicit memories. So implicit are kind of the automatic. We don't even realize it's there. Explicit is when we're able to pull it out and put a name to it and remember, oh, remember when I went to dinner with the jerk that broke up to me at dinner. I remember that now, not just why do I avoid that restaurant. And the implicit memories are actually really what kind of lead to PTSD on a much grander scale. And so a lot of that work doing PTSD work and trauma work is pulling out some of that implicit memory, putting it into the explicit area. So the person's able to process and deal with it at that level. So it's no longer here really influencing things. Same thing with kiddos. So getting to strategy number 6, using the remote of the mind, replaying memories. Sometimes kiddos aren't ready to really sit down and talk about that whole memory, that whole situation that happened, that we were talking about in the previous strategies. This is going to give them an opportunity of like, okay, use a remote. You know what? If you need to skip over that part because you're just not ready to talk about it yet, that's okay. You don't want to talk about the car wreck itself, but you're ready to talk about, oh, the fireman pulled you out and you were able to ride in the back of the ambulance with brother and laugh and joke because the EMT was hilarious. Fabulous. Let's talk about that. So it allows them to kind of pick and choose until they're ready at their own time to process that piece. It gives them a sense of control, and kiddos really need this sometimes because so much of their life is really out of their control. So number 7 is remember to remember, making recollection a part of your family's daily life. So just like the brain, I mean, the memory is a part of the brain. So we want to exercise our memory and make sure we're utilizing it. We want to continue to develop it. We want to continue to strengthen it. And how we can do that is by doing this on a regular basis. Again, moving that implicit to that explicit so we can process it and it's just that not that automatic reaction. So ask questions for the kiddos to bring it to their recollection, from simple things with the younger kiddos, sometimes a little more complex with the older. Again, journaling can be a huge, huge tool to utilize in this. But we want the kiddos to have that space to share those stories, share those experiences going to Disney World. Okay, you went to Disney World. Fabulous. What'd you like about it? You remember when you interacted with Tinkerbell and Pooh Bear? What'd you like about that? So bringing some of those details to the forefront, remembering them, rather than just saying, oh, it was a great experience. So if you've noticed, everything kind of fits together that we've talked about. It's not completely separate from each other. As we move into the next round of strategies, again, remember there's 12. There's a couple of pieces that we want to talk about. First one is what Siegel and Bryson have called the wheel of awareness. Kind of visualize a bicycle wheel. This makes this presentation really hard because I'm very visual and I'm like, I'm doing all these things and people are probably looking at the PowerPoint and it's not on the PowerPoint. But visualize a bicycle wheel. And at the hub, you know, the center where all the spokes connect, you have kind of the inner place of the mind, right? The rim is anything that we pay attention to outside of ourselves. This can be thoughts and feelings, dreams, desires, memories, perceptions, body sensations. And then you have all the spokes that kind of help you get from that inner into the outer part of the rim, right? So the hub's really looking and focusing as like that executive part of the brain where we can make the decisions, we're able to connect with others, and more importantly, connect more fully to ourselves. And so then it's also keying up where our awareness is and where our focus is on that rim. So I want you to think right now as a person, if we're thinking about our own rim, you know, what might be on there, right? Well, here's my job title, here's my professional, here's my home, here's my leftover anxiety from my misstep earlier, here's my want to be seen as a professional and perfectionist, and here's me being a dog lover and a sports lover and all these different things. Well, right now, obviously my hub is letting me focus on what's more important in this moment. So right now, being a sports lover and a dog lover isn't really influencing me. But my focus on wanting to be viewed as professional and successful in all of those positive things that I have identified for myself, that's going to shape how I'm feeling and what I'm thinking about myself even. So when you're fully professional, like, so I'm going to challenge you, like right now, are you being fully aware right now of this presentation? Or is there something off here on another part of your rim that might be preventing you from being fully present? You know, do we have a sick kid at home? Would we rather be watching whatever NCAA games that are going on right now? Except for I don't think they're on yet. Regardless, but that's kind of my point. Like, where's our focus? What's shaping where our focus is? So we want to make sure we're helping the kids be aware of their own wheel, and we want to empower them to be able to make the appropriate shifts. Is now a time to focus on schoolwork, or is now a time to focus on being a good friend? And this also brings the component of distinguishing between the feel and the M. Think about the really big shift in language recently around I have depression or I am depressed. It's kind of the same thing. Is it a feeling or emotion that I have, or is this a personality trait? Depression's not a personality trait. It's just an emotion that you're feeling right now. And so how do we separate that, and how do we help the kiddos be able to separate what they're feeling from who they are as a person? So yeah, like, for example, I will use myself as an example all the time. It's just easy to relate to because I know me, right? So earlier, I made a misstep. Am I saying, oh, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I'm a horrible presenter, I should never do that, I should never do this again? Or should I say, okay, I made a boo-boo, okay, I'm still professional, and I'm moving forward, right? So a lot of it has something to do with some reframing, but it's also separating it out of, okay, yes, I feel upset that I did this, and I'm still doing this because it's not going to change who I am as a person, because as people, we're not perfect, you know, and that's okay. We're allowed to feel certain things. And again, connecting the hemispheres of our brain between this is how I feel versus who I am. So the wheel helps teach the kids that they have a choice about what they choose to focus on and where they put their attention. And again, it brings in that integration piece of how can we integrate everything of awareness around this is how I feel versus who I am. So Siegel also talks about mindset. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Actually, I'm going to let him talk about that a little bit later, but it's really just looking at self-awareness and looking at how do we connect with others. So being mindful of time, I will kind of leave that there. So the next strategy is number 8 of let the clouds of emotion roll by, teaching that feelings come and go. Emotions are just a temporary state. Neuroscience actually indicates and shows us that any emotion lasts for about an average of 90 seconds. So when they say happiness is fleeting, it really is. Literally, neuroscience tells us that, and that's okay. And so we want the kiddos to be able to recognize, like, yes, you may feel sad now, and that's okay. And let's reconvene in a couple hours and see how you're feeling, if you're feeling a little bit better. So we want the kiddos to be able to use some mindset strategies of being able to recognize that they feel this way, and it's a feeling versus like a trait in who they are. Number 9 is SIFT. So paying attention to what's going on inside. So SIFT is an acronym. S is sensations. I is images. F is feelings. And T is thoughts. So these are all the different components that we want to consider when we're helping the kiddo identify what's going on in themselves. You know, what are some sensations going on? You know, do you have butterflies in your tummy? Are your palms sweaty? Images, what are you seeing? What's going on there? Feelings, what's going on there? How are you feeling? Are you feeling sad, nervous? A million different things, right? And thoughts, what are some of those cognitions going on? What are you telling yourself? So common things to incorporate are some of the moving into a somatic awareness of, like, where do you feel that in your body? You know, when you start feeling really mad, where do you start feeling that? Do you notice your shoulders hunching up? Do you notice fist clenching? So bringing awareness into steps like that. This is also where I really challenge any professionals, parents, and kids too, especially, is moving beyond what I call the ads. So sad, mad, glad, when we're looking at feelings. I always encourage, there's two pieces that I always have with me, and that's the anger iceberg and a feelings wheel, because I do try and move beyond that, because there's so much more that we can pull out that's so much more informative of what's really going on. A lot of times mad hides something else. Sad, it hides something else. All valid, and let's kind of go a little bit deeper using some of that mindset. And so regularly orienting children to normal SIFT check-ins can be helpful when they're in a calm state, to be able to use it when they're in a heightened state. So even if you're driving along to school, it's like, hey, let's do a check-in. What do you feel right now? Oh, you feel the seatbelt tightening across your chest. Okay, do you feel the air through your hair since the windows are down? And just kind of step through that, making it normal. So when they are heightened, it's a little easier to do, and it's not completely shut down, blocked down, looking at you like you're crazy. All right. Number 10 is exercise mindset, or getting back to the hub. So again, thinking of that bicycle wheel that we were just talking about, how do we bring the focus back to the hub, or the center of that tire, and get back to more integration? So using breathing exercises, pulling in SIFT to be able to have the kiddo identify how they are really feeling and thinking, and being more in balance with themselves. So I'm going to play a short little clip around what Siegel describes for mindset. Help you get a better idea.
Hi, I'm Dan Siegel, and I'd like to introduce you to the concept of mindsight. Mindsight is a word that I made up years ago when I was in medical school, and I found that some of my professors were not empathic with their patients, nor with their students, and I was puzzled as to how a clinician, especially a professor of medicine, would not see the mind of their patients. So mindsight was literally seeing the mind. And as the years have unfolded since then, when I was in medical school and I entered pediatrics and went into psychiatry, mindsight became a concept that was really useful, because when I worked with people, my patients, I found if I could teach them to have more insight into themselves and empathy for others, they actually could create more integration in their lives. Integration, which is the honoring of differences and the promoting of linkages, is actually the fundamental way that we create secure attachments with our children when we have kids that are growing up. It's the way in any relationship we create well-being, through integration. And it turns out that integration in our nervous system, for example, in our brains, letting the left and right be honored for their differences and then linkages created, integration even in our brain is the fundamental basis of self-regulation and well-being. So integration is what mindsight creates. And what that means is that mindsight has three components. It has insight into yourself, empathy to understand another person's experience, and integration, both within you, in your nervous system, and between you, honoring differences, promoting linkages in your relationships. So if mindsight is of interest to you, what's exciting is that we explore the whole science around mindsight in a field called interpersonal neurobiology. Mindsight has relationships to other things like mindful awareness, where we can understand that even mindfulness practices that have gone on for thousands of years are promoting integration internally. And as recent studies have shown, mindfulness also creates empathy interpersonally. So mindsight helps us understand how integration, empathy, and insight all fit together. And whether you're looking at mindfulness or something called presence, or looking at secure attachment, this mindsight framework allows us to scientifically bring them all together as one. Hi.
Okay. So like Siegel said, it's insight plus empathy and integration. That's mindsight. So as we kind of wrap up with these last couple of strategies, again, some components to keep in mind when we're thinking about these last two is the me versus we, that interaction with others, because that's a key part. Mirroring is a big part of this as well when we're thinking about a we. And so as we're looking at regulation with others, you'll hear the term co-regulation. Well, hopefully you hear the term co-regulation. It's a term I use in working with families of, in order to help a kid bring themselves down, instead of just expecting them to do it on their own, I'm going to do it with them. You'll see a kid in class, a teacher in class, and class is super loud. They just got in from lunch or recess, and they're super talkative and they're just ready to go. And teachers trying to get them back on task so they can teach the next lesson. You'll see the teachers start to whisper, and slowly the class kind of starts to match, right? There's a reason for that. That's neuroscience. That's the mirroring component, because as humans, we are trying to be a we. And mirroring is one of those things. Our neurons are trying to fire to match each other. So these next couple of strategies are focusing on moving just from a me to a we, and how do we do that? So the 11th strategy is increasing the family fun factor. Try and say that 3 times really quickly. So it's making it a point to enjoy each other. You don't want to just be the adult having to yell at a kid, or trying to have the hard conversations, or get the kid to complete a task. You want to have some fun with it. So even as a professional, how do we bring fun into it instead of just talking about all the hard stuff? Let's go shoot some hoops. Let's do an art project. Let's just chit chat about the new dog you got, right? So it's building connection with that other person. So a lot of this is really coming back from what in the book they call the dopamine squirts. We want to get those squirts going because it creates happiness, and it's also like a connection, right? So dopamine's the neurotransmitter, what they call the chemical of reward. And so we want to get some of that pleasure going when they interact with us, so they want to do it again. All right, so last strategy is connection through conflict. Conflict's a part of life. We can't avoid it. Hopefully we can deal with it in a healthy way, because it can be very productive. But how do we do that? So we want to bring in 3 mindset strategies that Bryson and Siegel identify. So you want to see through the other person's eyes. We want the kids to be able to recognize other points of view. We want to listen to what is not being said. So again, bringing in some of those nonverbal communication and attuning to others. Oh, she said it was okay, but her head's downcast and she won't meet and she's curled up. Her body language may not be agreeing that she's okay with that. And then repair. You want to teach kids to make things right after a conflict. Sometimes saying sorry is just not enough. I mean, I think it's a great step, but I also use the example of a broken plate with kids. Like, okay, let's go take, this plate and slam it on the ground. Okay. Did you, tell the plate sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Did that fix the plate? No. Okay, so what could fix the plate? Well, maybe there's no fixing of it, but maybe it broke in big enough pieces. It's not a million shards and it's just like 3 pieces. Well, I've got to Swiffer it up and then I can glue it back together. So there's sometimes some extra actions and steps, some behavior specifically to address that repair process. But really, in conclusion, I mean, we talked about that integration piece is a key component, underlying piece of the book. Looking at the right brain, left brain, the upstairs, the downstairs, and bringing those throughout 12 different strategies that Siegel and Bryson identified throughout their book. We really are just hoping to promote a connection and a deeper understanding with our kiddos, and really just help our kiddos develop and be, emotionally healthy and being able to be regulated. So yeah, that's what I got for you today. Thank you for your patience and my stumbling. Hopefully I didn't stumble too bad where you got confused. But if you are, now's a great time for questions.
Well, I've read the book. And when I became a grandparent, I read the book, and it sort of helped me understand what I had done wrong with my own children. You know, how you want the anxiety and the anger and the trauma and the tantrums to stop. You start getting hepped up with them, right? And I just remember doing that as a parent. And as a grandparent, you have the ability to kind of step back and let your
Yep.
your fun part not slip. Right. But I think this is not something we learn, right?
No.
Necessarily from our own parents. And it's just very handy, I think, to know, to think about the fact that they're not operating
For
when
sure.
they need to. Right.
Yeah, and that was definitely something I learned with my niece, was that I can't just match her. That's just not going to get us anywhere. It's going to get me upset. It's going to get her upset. We end up in a bad place. But as I'm learning some of these pieces as I'm going through grad school, I'm able to be like, okay, I'm really upset right now. I'm very frustrated. My feelings are hurt. I'm going to go take a break, and then we can go talk about this later. And so as I started doing that, I noticed she started doing that. Instead of, I'm a naturally loud talker. And so it's very easy for my voice to raise when I'm, getting escalated in my emotions. And when I was more intentional about my voice and almost whispering, that's how she knew I was really mad, because I started to the point where I was whispering. It was so much more effective because we were able to have a conversation. And I'm like, okay, I'm staying centered. I am not just going to fly off the wall and, yell, why the F did you do that? Fortunately, she was a good kid, so I didn't have to do that very often. But it definitely made a difference. And you see her do that, in college, a senior in college, even, she was in the band, and she told me she uses some of those strategies of like trying to stay calm and link with somebody to hear them out in order to move forward. But if you have any questions, this is my contact information. Please don't hesitate to outreach. But otherwise, thank you for this opportunity and speaking with you all today, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.